This happened a few months ago. I was a 32-year-old night shift nurse at a small community hospital. It was just after midnight. I had just wrapped up my usual rounds, and it was unusually quiet. I had always known the place was old and a bit eerie, but that night, it felt different. I can't shake the feeling. I was stocking supplies in the back room when I heard it. A child's voice, soft and pleading, calling for help. My heart raced. Maybe it was a nurse with a child? I rushed to check the patient rooms. I opened the first door. Empty. The second room, too. There were no kids admitted that night. The voice echoed in my mind. What was happening? Over the following nights, everything got stranger. Doors that should have been open were shut tight. I'd see a room with the door ajar, and then when I returned, it was closed. Once, a patient insisted they saw someone at the foot of their bed, an old woman staring at them. I understood their fear. I checked, but nobody was there. They must have been confused, right? I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Then came the lights. At least once each shift, machines would blink off and on, like they were messing with me. One night, while prepping an IV, the monitor just stopped working. A chill ran down my spine. I turned to look behind me, feeling that eerie silence. I wrapped my arms around myself, telling myself this was nothing but tiredness. But I wasn't so sure anymore. One night, after a long shift, I was walking down the hall when it hit me. Someone was behind me. I turned quickly, and once again, nothing. Just the empty, dim hallway. I used to say, it's just fatigue, to calm myself down. But then it happened again. I heard whispering, low and fuzzy. It made me shiver. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I had responsibilities. Just like that child's voice, I felt drawn to something. I felt like I was losing my grip. One night, as I walked past an empty room, the door swung open all by itself. I froze. The room was dark. My heart pounded. Suddenly, the child's voice was back, clearer this time, but I couldn't understand the words. Then I heard a different voice. It asked, "Why are you still here?" I spun around, but nobody was there. My breath quickened. Something was very wrong. I started to dread each shift. Each sound felt amplified. Each dark corner seemed to hold something sinister. I kept thinking about the voices, the old woman, the child, whispers I couldn't place. What was it that I had walked into? That hospital felt like a trap, a place where reality blurred. I couldn't explain it. I just wanted to leave, to get away from the voices and faces that made my skin crawl. But I couldn't. I was tied to that place, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, waiting. I couldn't escape the dread that wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. Each night shift dragged on. Time felt distorted, and I often found myself glancing at the clock. Yet each hour was more haunting than the last. I needed answers. I was determined to figure out the mystery behind the strange happenings. The next night, I decided to take a different approach. I made a plan to openly investigate the hospital. I would document everything strange I encountered. I thought, if I could catch some of it on paper, maybe I could talk myself down from the fear spiraling in my gut. I grabbed my flashlight and set out. The first part of my shift went as usual. I hurried past the same tired nurses' station and peered into patient rooms that looked dark and empty. My resolve began to waver, but I pressed on. I was not going to let fear rule me. It was around 3 a.m. when I heard the child's voice again. "Help me." It was soft, yet it felt like a knife through my composure. I rushed toward it, my heart pounding. The sound seemed to come from the old storage room, the one filled with out-of-date supplies and scattered medical equipment. I had avoided that room since I started, but something pushed me forward. I opened the door and stepped in. Dust motes danced in my flashlight beam. The shelves were filled with forgotten items, but the voice echoed louder. "Help me." It grew desperate. I wanted to call for someone, but my throat felt tight. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving in the corner of my eye. I spun toward it, but nothing materialized. My instinct told me to leave, but I couldn't move. "Which room are you in?" I asked, trying to speak calmly. No response. The air felt thick now, suffocating. My flashlight flickered ominously. I pressed the button, and in that moment of uncertainty, I thought I saw a figure, a small outline of a child. Panic surged. I stumbled back, crashing into a stack of boxes. They toppled over, knocking a few old items to the floor with a dull thud. Suddenly, everything went dark. The lights above flickered and then went out. I stood frozen, heart racing, surrounded by oppressive silence. I could barely breathe. My hands trembled as I tried to recall the way out. Just as I was about to make a break for it, I heard footsteps, slow and methodical, coming closer from the hallway. My pulse quickened. Someone else was there. The child? Or was it something worse? Then a soft voice whispered again. "Why are you still here?" This time, I didn't hesitate. I bolted out of the room and down the hallway, my senses screaming at me to escape whatever I had stirred up. I reached the nurse's station, frantically gasping for breath. I knew I had to share what happened with someone, but who would believe me? Would they blame fatigue again? I glanced back toward the storage room, half expecting to see the shadow again. I felt a stirring discomfort in my gut. I didn't just need to leave my shift. I needed answers before something terrible happened. I went to grab a colleague, but as I turned, the lights flickered back on, and the sound of shuffling came from behind me. I felt it again, a cold rush up my spine. Someone was there. I whipped around, heart pounding, and found myself facing a hallway that seemed just as empty as before. The shuffling stopped, leaving me in an eerie silence. My instincts screamed for me to run, but something stopped me. I took a hesitant step forward. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. No answer. The dim light cast long shadows, and I squinted into the darkness, half expecting someone to jump out at me. I turned back toward the nurse's station. Maybe I just imagined it. Fatigue could do that to you. I didn't want to look weak in front of my colleagues, especially not now. I reached for a cup of coffee to steady my hands, when I heard it again, a faint whispering, brushing against my ears like a cold wind. "Help me." It was coming from the main corridor. I felt drawn to it, a morbid curiosity taking hold. The urge to turn back was almost overwhelming, but with adrenaline tingling in my veins, I wanted to get to the bottom of this. I took a deep breath and followed the voice, moving carefully down the hall. The whisper grew louder, weaving through the air, leading me toward the old pediatric wing. I hesitated at the entrance, memories flooding back. This area had been closed for years. Rumors of a child who had gone missing had been swirling for ages, but no one had ever discovered what really happened. Dark tales filled the break room, but now I felt them crawling up my skin. "Help me!" The voice sounded desperate, almost pleading. I stepped inside the wing, the chill of the air sending shivers across my body. Shadows danced against the cracked walls, and I strained to hear anything amidst the silence. I passed room after room, the decay every bit as unsettling as I remembered. As I walked deeper inside, I spotted something on the floor in the corner of one room, a faded toy. It was a small, tattered teddy bear. I reached for it, my heart racing with dread. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. "Where are you?" I whispered, half expecting a response. The answer came only in the form of silence. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a tugging on my lab coat. I spun around, my heart nearly stopping. A shadow darted into the next room. "No!" I gasped, my feet moving before I could think twice. I rushed after it, guiding me like a beacon. I pushed through the threshold, my pulse a thundering drum in my ears. The room was completely empty, but the air felt charged with energy. I turned, searching for any trace of the child. "Why did you run?" I shouted, frustration mingling with fear. Then it hit me. Another voice, distinct but distant. This one belonged to a nurse, calling my name from the corridor. "Hey, are you in here?" The distraction broke the heavy spell over me. For a moment, I felt the weight of reality come crashing down. I had to get out of this place. Whatever was happening, I couldn't face it alone anymore. I bolted back toward the entrance, but before I could escape, the door slammed shut behind me. Panic bloomed in my chest. I scrambled against it, thrashing, but it wouldn't budge. That's when I turned back and saw the child standing there, no more than 10 feet away. The girl's eyes were wide and hollow, her mouth moving silently. Stricken with dread, I could only stare as the walls around me began to fade. "Help me," she mouthed again, and that was it. I knew I was not leaving without answers. I stood frozen, staring at the girl. The fading walls seemed to pulse with an unsteady heartbeat. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around me like a thick fog. "Help me," flowed from her lips in a haunting echo. I could barely breathe. "Why are you here?" I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. The girl's expression twisted in anguish, tears glistening in her hollow eyes. I felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her, but I was terrified. I didn't even know what I was dealing with. Without warning, she pointed toward the corner of the room, where flickering shadows swirled and danced. I followed her gaze, my heart racing again. Something shifted there, a dark figure taking shape and then melting back into the shadows. My pulse quickened, panic clawing at my chest. "Stay back!" I shouted, raising my hands instinctively. The chill in the air intensified, wrapping around me like chains. A sense of danger swept through the room, and all I could think of was escape. The child didn't move closer, but her face tightened in fear as she continued to point toward the figure. I turned to the door. My only way out was blocked. "Let me out!" I yelled, banging on the door with my fists. The creaking echoed in the emptiness, but no sound came back to me. I was trapped. "Please!" I pressed my body against the door, desperation surging through me. The girl's eyes widened in fear again, and I glanced back just in time to see the shadow shoot forward. It felt like a cold breeze swirling past me, brushing against my skin like ice. I spun around, my instinct screaming at me to run, to hide, to do anything to avoid whatever was happening. And then I saw it. The shadow froze mid-motion and took on a shape, distorting until it bore the feeble figure of a child, much like the one in front of me. But this child wasn't the same. She flickered, her features sharp and twisted, an unsettling grin plastered on her face. "Help me!" The voice echoed around the room again, but it was different, tainted. It wasn't the sweet, pleading tone of the girl. I stumbled back, shock coursing through me. "No, you're not her!" My throat felt dry, panic tightening its grip. The shadows snarled, the air packed thick with an energy that made my skin crawl. Suddenly, the room shifted again, walls warping as if they were made of smoke. They flickered to black before shifting to a blinding light, and a gasp escaped my lips. Just as quickly, everything plunged back into darkness, and with it, the girl vanished. I was left alone, the acrid scent of fear seeping through the room. Then, just as I turned to bang on the door again, a new sound filled the void. The soft cries of children echoed, real children, mixed with laughter that chilled me to the bone. I felt dizzy, disoriented. It was a cacophony of innocence twisted into something sinister. Desperation clawed at my throat. I couldn't breathe. "Someone help me!" I shouted again, but my voice seemed to get lost in the darkness. Then I caught a glimpse of the girl again, her eyes pleading. She stood in front of me, shaking her head. I could feel her fear seeping into me, a desperate urgency. With the whispers morphing into a loud cry for help, the energy in the room shifted again. Something was coming, and I knew I had to find a way out before it found me. That's when I noticed something glinting behind her, a small metallic object half buried in the floor. I suddenly felt the weight of the girl's gaze on it, as if that was the key to everything. I crouched to reach for it, but with every inch I moved closer, the room started to tremble. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay beyond that door was getting closer. I reached for the metallic object, my fingers trembling as I brushed against the cold surface. It felt wrong, almost alive under my touch, as if it pulsed with energy that sent ripples of fear through me. The closer I got, the more the shadows shifted, swirling like a storm. I felt like a moth drawn to a flame. A deafening burst of laughter pealed through the darkness, echoing off the warped walls. I jumped back, instinctively pulling my hand away from the object. The laughter was childlike, innocent, but it twisted into something cruel. My skin crawled, and an overwhelming dread settled in my gut. "What do you want?" I yelled into the dark, my voice wavering. I could hear the girl's distant sobs mixed with the laughter, and it made my heart race. The girl stood rooted in place, her face contorting with torment. I wished I could make her understand that I was trying to help. I took a deep breath and forced myself to meet her gaze. "If it's that thing, I can help you. Just tell me what to do." But she shook her head again, tears streaming down her face. Behind her, shadows thickened, and something loomed just beyond my vision. I had to act fast. Grabbing the metallic object, I yanked it free from the ground. A terrible shriek pierced the air, as if the very walls screamed in agony. The object was a small key, tarnished and old, and it felt heavier than it should. I couldn't tell what it unlocked, but I could sense its importance. "Use it!" The girl's eyes ignited with a spark of hope. For the first time, there was a flicker of encouragement in her expression, even as my heart sank. I turned back to the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. I tried to fit the key into the lock, but it didn't work. I cursed under my breath and twisted it again, desperation throwing me off balance. Why won't it open? The shadows quivered as a low growl rose from the corner of the room. An unseen presence loomed behind me, and the child's delicate form flickered like an old film reel. I could feel it now, a malevolent force edging closer, eager to consume me. "Help me!" the girl screeched. "You must hurry! He's coming!" I lunged at the door again, slamming my shoulder against it, willing it to budge. The laughter intensified, mocking me. The cries of the children joined in a discordant symphony. Just when I thought I was about to break through, the door suddenly felt ice cold. I glanced back, and dread filled my chest. In the shadows, a face began to form, twisted, horrific, its grin sharp and wide. It was an echo of the girl, but darker, a terrifying mirror image that sent waves of terror through me. I turned to the girl. "What do I do?" "Unlock the truth!" she shouted, desperation flooding her voice. Before I could react, the door rattled violently. The shadows surged forward like a wave crashing to shore, pulling me down into the dark. I felt the cold fingers of the evil entity wrapping around me, and in a final act of defiance, I twisted the key one last time. And then, everything went black. I woke up gasping, lying on the floor of my room. The familiar hum of my bedside lamp pierced the heavy darkness. For a moment, I thought I had escaped, but the air held a cloying sense of dread. I had survived, for now, but the girl's cries echoed in my mind. Who was the one I had freed? And why did that key feel so familiar? Something wasn't over. I could feel it tugging at me, a shadow yet to be unveiled. The sun barely crept through my window when I finally dragged myself out of bed. I felt exhausted, haunted by the girl's eyes. What did she mean by unlocking the truth? I needed answers. Maybe I could find something in the hospital, something that connected to her. At work, the sterile smell of antiseptic greeted me, but it felt different today. The usual chatter was muted. The chill from the night shift still lingered. I clocked in, my mind swirling with thoughts. While gathering my supplies, I noticed the old janitor, Mr. Ellis, shuffling down the hall. His eyes were glazed, almost lifeless. "What's going on, Mr. Ellis?" I asked, trying to engage him. He paused, shaking his head slowly. "Nothing good, kid." His voice trembled. "You should steer clear of the old wing. Strange noises, shadows that move." I felt a chill run down my spine. The old wing? That was where they kept the patients who weren't expected to come back. As I made my rounds, I couldn't shake Mr. Ellis's warning. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt through me. I tried to focus on my tasks, but my eyes kept drifting toward the end of the corridor leading to the old wing. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement. I squinted, but nothing was there. Heat pricked at the back of my neck, and I decided to investigate. Against my better judgment, I headed toward the door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The atmosphere felt heavier as I pushed the door open. The air was stale, and flickering fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry bees. I stepped inside, and something told me to turn back. I didn't listen. I wandered deeper into the dimly lit hall, and cold spots danced against my skin. I felt that sensation again, the one I had experienced with the key. There was something here, something I had to find. Then the laughter came, high-pitched and echoing. It sounded just like the girl's cries from my dream. My heart raced as I pressed on, following the sound until I reached a small room at the end of the corridor. Cracks lined the walls, dark stains marred the floor. It looked like no one had been here in years. The laughter grew louder. I could feel it vibrating in my bones. I pushed the door open and froze. Inside, there was an old patient's bed, frayed and covered in dust. But it wasn't the bed that caught my attention. The room was littered with toys. Dolls with hollow eyes, half-deflated balloons, and a music box that played a haunting tune. But what caught my eye was an envelope on the table, its edges worn. I moved closer, hands clammy. The name scrawled on the front made my breath hitch. It was the girl's name. I tore it open, my pulse quickening. The note was simple, but what it revealed made my blood run cold. "You hold the key to our freedom." Just then, the lights flickered violently, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged, and I stumbled back, knocking over a dusty toy. A low growl echoed from the corner of the room, a reminder that I was not alone. Someone was watching. I could hardly breathe in the darkness. I turned, heart pounding, but there was nothing to see. The growl had faded, like a bad memory. I was alone, yet I didn't feel alone. My thoughts raced. Should I call for help or try to leave? As I took a hesitant step back, I heard a soft rustling. I squinted but didn't see anything, just the dust motes floating in the dim light. I imagined how foolish I would feel if I startled some poor night nurse or scared myself for no reason. But my instincts screamed at me to get out. I felt around for the door, my fingers brushing against the peeling paint. Suddenly, the laughter erupted again, echoing in that terrible space. It was closer this time, like the girl was right beside me, her voice swirling around the room. I stumbled forward, tripping on an old toy. I pushed through the door, practically throwing myself back into the hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered back on, and I squeezed my eyes shut. I was out. I let out a shaky breath, but my relief was short-lived. A shadow moved at the edge of my vision. I whirled around, but the corridor was empty. No one was there. Just me and the oppressive silence. I knew I had to see this through. I had to understand what was happening. The envelope was still clenched in my hand, my fingers trembling against its rough surface. I opened it again, reading the note. "You hold the key to our freedom." Why did it feel so heavy? I turned back toward the gap in the door, leading to the old wing. A new sense of determination surged through me. I had to find the girl. I couldn't explain it, but I needed to deliver whatever freedom she was chasing. First, I needed to know more about the patients who stayed here. Were there records? Could I find them? I made my way to the nurse's station, my mind racing with questions. The overhead lights buzzed, the atmosphere buzzing with something just out of reach. I found Sarah, a senior nurse, poring over charts. "Hey, Sarah," I started, then hesitated. "Can you tell me about the patients in the old wing? I think I found something strange." Her pen paused, and she looked up, concern etching lines on her face. "Strange how? You shouldn't be going in there. Those patients, they're not like you think." "What do you mean?" She leaned in closer, her voice low. "They were mostly children, lost and forgotten. Some of them still linger." I felt a chill grip me. "What do you mean, linger?" Sarah stared at me, gauging my reaction. "They say you can hear them sometimes. Their laughter, their cries. It's like they're waiting for someone. It's unsettling." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from the direction of the old wing. My stomach dropped. "What was that?" She looked alarmed. "I don't know, but we should check it out." Suddenly, I realized I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was part of this darkness. Whatever I had uncovered, it was demanding me to follow. I took a deep breath, bracing myself as we made our way down the hall toward the chaos. I had to know the truth. But what if the truth was worse than I could ever imagine? As we walked toward the noise, every step felt like an echo of dread. The sterile smell of the hospital washed over me, but it barely registered against the rising tension in my chest. I had expected a clatter or a misplaced cart, but the sound had felt too deliberate, like a warning. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, thankfully breaking the silence. Her eyes darted around, searching the shadows. I grabbed her elbow, the flesh warm and comforting, as we approached a door marked with a peeling sign, "Staff only." The door had a small window, and through it I could see a flicker of movement, a blur that sent my heart racing anew. "What is happening in there?" I breathed, more to myself than Sarah. "It can't be what I think it is," she murmured, her voice shaky. We pushed the door open, the metal hinges creaking mournfully. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a flickering bulb above, casting grotesque shadows. Papers were strewn across the floor, as if a storm had blown through. But it wasn't the mess that caught my attention. In the far corner, there was a figure, a small girl, her back to us. She sat on the floor, tangled in shadows, clutching a faded teddy bear that looked as worn as the plush toys I had seen in the old wing. "Hello?" Sarah called out, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. I squeezed her arm, unsure if I wanted to draw attention to ourselves. The girl turned slowly. Her face was obscured, the light grimacing away from her. But I felt her gaze pierce through the dimness, and something about it felt achingly familiar. It was as if I'd seen her in my dreams. "Please, don't be scared," Sarah urged, taking a step forward. "Are you lost?" The girl didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her teddy bear, the seams barely holding it together. "You have to let me go," she said softly, her voice melodic yet haunting. My heart raced. "Let you go? What do you mean?" A distant laugh echoed faintly in response. I felt goosebumps ripple across my skin. "She's been waiting," a voice echoed from the shadows, not from the girl, but nearby. A middle-aged woman stepped into the flickering light, her face lined with sadness and memories. "We all have." "Who are you?" I startled at her. Presence, unprepared for this new layer of the mystery. "My name is Margaret, and these children, they are trapped in pain. They can't move on. "You must understand. They are lost and they need your help," she said earnestly. I glanced at the little girl, an ache tugging at my heart. I thought of the note in my pocket, the weight of it heavier now. "What do you mean they need my help?" Suddenly, the lights above buzzed and went out. Darkness spilled over us like ink, swallowing the room whole. I gasped, adrenaline igniting my senses. "Get her out of here!" Sarah shouted, panic rising in her voice. I reached out, but the girl had vanished into the shadows. "What just happened?" I cried, my voice tinged with fear. Margaret lingered, her silhouette a mere suggestion. "Find the key," she whispered, her voice fading into silence. Then it was just us, alone. I knew deep down this was just the beginning. There were layers here that needed unfolding, and I felt a need to dig deeper. Whatever the truth was, it was starting to unravel, and I had to stay on its trail. Just then, I heard a giggle echoing in the dark, chilling my bones. Someone was waiting for me to find them, and I wondered how far I was willing to go. I took a step forward, heart thundering. What had I stepped into? The darkness felt alive, wrapping around us and whispering secrets I wasn't supposed to know. I tried to calm my racing heart, but the giggle lingered in the air, twisting my insides. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "I'm here," she replied, but her tone was shaky. "What do we do?" I strained to see through the blackness. There was something unnerving about being in this room without any light. "We need to find the girl," I managed, remembering her plea. It felt like the thread of a dream I didn't want to lose. "Can you see anything?" Sarah asked, inching closer. "Just shadows," I said, squinting. "But Just then, a flicker of light sparked on the far wall, illuminating a corner briefly. I froze, straining to make out what it was. There, momentarily, I could see the girl's teddy bear lying abandoned amidst the clutter of paper and debris. "Wait, over there!" I shouted softly, grabbing Sarah's arm to guide her toward it. As we stepped cautiously into the low light, I could feel an unexpected chill sweep through the room. It was as if a draft had blown through a broken window, except the windows were sealed tight. "This can't be good," I muttered under my breath. We reached the bear, its button eyes glinting ominously. "What are we supposed to do with this?" Sarah asked, her voice barely louder than a whisper. I crouched down, sliding my fingers across the worn fabric. It must mean something. A clue? I stood up, scanning the floor. For anything else. That was when I noticed a glimmer beneath the papers. "Hold on." Sarah watched as I peeled away some of the sheets. There, half buried, was a small, old-fashioned key. It was tarnished and delicate, but there was no mistaking it. "Look, do you think? Maybe it's the key she mentioned?" Sarah's eyes widened. "You think it could unlock something?" "Only one way to find out," I said. The adrenaline surged again. I tucked the key into my pocket, feeling its weight as if it carried the answer to what was happening here. "Where do we even begin?" Sarah asked, glancing at the dark corners around us. "There must be a room or something." "Let's check back through the hall," I suggested, my heart still racing. We edged our way back toward the door, trying to ignore the unsettling silence that pressed against us. The distant laugh echoed again, more pronounced this time. "Stay close," I said firmly, though my voice faltered. The shadows seemed to shift and sway around us. Just as I reached for the door handle, I felt a tug on my sleeve. I whipped around to find Sarah staring wide-eyed at the wall behind me. "Is that?" she began, but I didn't have time to ask what she saw. A soft, singing voice broke through the darkness, echoing the words, "You have to let me go." I felt a wave of icy fear crash over me. That voice belonged to the girl. "We need to move," I urged. I pushed open the door, and we stumbled back into the hallway filled with flickering lights. But before we could step out, a shadow darted past us and disappeared. I swore I saw the girl's face for just a moment, a look of desperation crossing her features. It shook me. "What did you see?" Sarah gasped, looking back at the open door. I don't know," I said, gripping the key in my pocket like a lifeline. "But whatever this is, it's inviting us to dive deeper into it." We stepped out into the hallway, uncertainty clawing at my gut. The building felt strangely alive, and as collapsed whispers swirled around us, I realized this was just the beginning of a haunting mystery that demanded to be uncovered. I took one last deep breath, the air thick with anticipation. The flickering lights above cast eerie shadows as Sarah and I made our way deeper into the old wing. The murmurs of the past echoed off the walls, draping the corridor in a blanket of unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were tracking our every move. "Do you think the girl is still here?" I asked, glancing back to check the dim hallway behind us. "We have to hope so," Sarah replied, her voice steadier than I felt. "She's our only clue." The key in my pocket felt heavy, and I instinctively knew it would lead us toward the answers we desperately sought. The hall stretched endlessly, filled with ghostly whispers that seemed to beckon us onward. Each step we took propelled us deeper into a world tangled with grief and memories. We finally stopped at an old storage room, its door creaking as I pushed it open. The stale air washed over us, filled with dust and mystery. Inside, the remnants of forgotten lives lay scattered among the shelves, equipment long deemed obsolete and toys covered in layers of neglect. "Look," Sarah whispered, pointing to a small door at the far end of the room. "It looks like it's part of a closet, but it could lead somewhere else." We exchanged a glance, the childlike curiosity battling our adult fears. Clutching the tarnished key, I approached the door. My pulse quickened as I placed the key into the lock. It didn't resist. Instead, it turned with unsettling ease. The door creaking open slowly, revealing a small room lined with faded photographs of children. I stepped inside, Sarah close behind. The air felt different, charged with a heart-wrenching energy. I couldn't help but shudder as I glanced at the photos. Smiling faces, bright eyes, all with their innocence captured in time. Who were they? I wondered aloud, tracing the outline of one photograph featuring a girl who curiously resembled the child I had seen before. Patients, I assume. Kids who never went home, Sarah said softly, gazing down at a crumpled paper resting on the floor. She picked it up, smoothing it out to reveal a list of names. It's a roster. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently again, plunging the room into darkness. A cacophony of laughter erupted, chilling my entire being as it resonated off the walls. "They're playing," I whispered, paralyzed with fear. "Playing?" Sarah echoed, her eyes wide. "Or something else?" I swallowed hard as the laughter turned into despairing wails. My heart raced as I felt the oppressive presence grow thicker around us, and I tried to focus on the rustling papers in my hand. These names, they must be significant. An overwhelming sense urged me to leave this room, but before I could act, I felt a sharp tug on my sleeve, the faintest brush of icy fingers. I turned, gasping. At the threshold stood the girl, her expression haunted, her eyes pleading. "Help me," she mouthed, her tiny body seeming to flicker in and out of existence. My heart shattered for her. "Hold on," I murmured, my voice breaking. "We're going to help you." "Use the key," Sarah urged, her voice trembling with urgency. I took a breath, adrenaline surging within me. Maybe the roster was the key to her freedom. I turned back to the wall, my fingers racing over the names. "Can we enter them somewhere, like a record-keeping system?" I wondered. The shadows swirled around us, growing impatient, as if pushing me to decide. "I don't know, but it feels like this place has layers," Sarah prompted, her gaze darting around nervously. "Something is pressing us forward." I clutched the papers, determination igniting within me. "Then we need to find the truth that can free her." My thoughts pulsed like a beat, with the shadows growing restless behind me, each echo urging me onward. "Let's head back to the nurses' station. Maybe there's something in the archives we can use." As we turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind us, trapping us in a web of darkness. I fought against panic, my heart thumping in sync with the cries that wrapped around us. "Stay together!" I yelled, but it felt futile. Shadowy figures danced just beyond my vision, taunting me. The girl was gone, disappeared into the thick of the dark, but her presence lingered like a thread through time. This was no longer just about uncovering a mystery. I was part of something greater, something that transcended even my understanding of life and death. "Can you hear them?" I questioned Sarah, holding my breath. She paused, her face strained, then nodded. "They're close," she whispered, her voice barely maintaining its steadiness. "We need to get out of here. We have to." Before she could finish, the laughter intensified. It surrounded us, engulfing everything in a melody of chaos. I reached for the door, but it felt heavy, like it didn't want to yield. Fear gripped me. In that moment, I recalled the last piece of the girl's plea. "We hold the key," I murmured, tracing the memories that began to resurface. It wasn't just the physical key. It was understanding. I realized then, amidst all the hysteria, that we were seeking not just the truth about the children, but closure, liberation from the web of sorrow pervading the air. As if the shadows understood my thoughts, they seemed to recede slightly, beckoning us onward. Sarah and I exchanged glances, the connection between us strong. We could either fight against the tide, or we could ride it. "Let's gather what we can and find the archives. We'll piece this together and help them all," I said. Just then, the door shattered open, but it felt less like an escape and more like an invitation. Together, we stepped through, propelled forward by the need to uncover what had been hidden within these walls, knowing the faces of lost children would guide us toward a resolution, wherever it led. I could only hope the truth would tear down the shadows, if only for a fleeting moment, to set them free, and maybe, in doing so, free myself.